This is Father Gregory Pine.
This is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
And welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. On this episode of Guestsplaining, we are very delighted to be joined by the hosts of the Catholic Man Show. We have here Adam and David. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Excited to be here.
On a scale of 1 to very excited, where would you say you rank at present?
I'd say I'm double very excited.
I'll go. Yeah. Ooh, wow.
Yeah. Took
Just
the
mark
upper
me down
limit.
for very excited.
All right.
Okay, perfect. All right,
Sure.
I'll trust
I'm
you going forward.
Temperately double very excited.
Okay, so many listeners of Godsplaining have better tastes in podcasts than is reflected by the fact that they listen to Godsplaining. So they will have probably listened to you on the Catholic Man Show. But for those who have not, or who have not yet, who have not transferred their affiliation and their undying love to your podcast, would you say a word of introduction? Who you are, where you're from, what you do, why it matters? Maybe not the last thing. We just really don't know.
Yeah. Sure. We started the Catholic Man Show in 2016. We bought a Catholic radio station in 2013, and we realized if we have a radio station, we don't have to ask anybody's permission to have a radio show. So we're like, we're going to start our own radio show. And then we threw it up as a podcast. And that's kind of the beginning parts of it. We were just trying to figure out how to live the Catholic faith as young Catholic dads. And let's talk about it on air.
I really if I look back on our journey about how we started a podcast, how we were running a Catholic radio station in Tulsa, it to me, I just kind of think what happened? How did we get here?
Yeah.
It all kind of happened by accident. And we didn't mean to do any of this, but
Here we are.
I guess we'll keep doing it. Here we go.
Yeah.
We're recording now. So don't stop talking,
The Dominican Friars with Godsplaining. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So
I really don't know exactly how we got here, but here we are.
Yeah. I'm the communications director for the Diocese of Tulsa, and I have a wife and 4 kids and 1 on the way.
I also have a wife. We just had our 5th. So we're winning. The Minahan Niles competition it's leaning Niles just by a little bit, not a whole lot. It's it's not in the bag yet, but so far
you gotta do like twins.
It's a close competition.
Quadruplets maybe or something, and then you're
Something.
way out ahead.
That would be
you might just
exhausting.
call the mercy rule. Yeah.
I think about having twins, and then I realize that that's probably not a healthy thing for me to think about.
It's not going to cause it to happen, unfortunately.
No, but it might cause despair, or other sorts of things that would not, just not healthy. It's not healthy.
Twins are great, though. I have to say, I have a twin brother, a fraternal twin.
Do you?
And and there's something about the connection between twins that because you can talk to them without a phone, you can just send message to them through your brain,
right?
And that's
telepathically.
That's super cool. That's super cool.
I knew it.
Yeah, quiet. He's I told him not to interrupt me. He's fine.
You know what? I'm so glad you said that. I always wanted to be a twin. I always wished I was a twin.
Yeah.
I just think that would have been amazing to have another one of me running
talk about
around.
A failure to your parents, I guess. Didn't make you a twin. Yeah.
Thanks, Mom.
So when you guys made reference to the fact that you're having a competition, trying to have many kids, and that you're outpacing each other by leaps and bounds, and twins and quadruplets, it made me think of the fact that you probably feel that question quite a bit. Like whenever people meet you socially and you're together, oh, is it a competition? And you're from Tulsa, so you're probably kinder than I am because I'm from the East Coast. But I don't know. I think part of how I was raised is you don't ask people the obvious question because the recognition is that they will have been asked that question a billion times. So for instance, there's a priest in our province named Father Innocent Smith. And I can't tell you the number of people who have asked him whether he is in fact innocent, to which he has to respond, why did you say that?
What do you think?
Yeah. You've put me in an awkward situation where now I'm angry.
Yes.
You've made me uninnocent insofar as you did this. So I would just like to congratulate you on your long-suffering attitude towards the questioning of all those whom you meet. But God
longanimity
bless.
is a virtue.
Yes. Look at that. You guys specialize in that.
Longanimity.
Other things you specialize in of late
Longanimity.
is living beyond Sunday. So you wrote a book published by Ascension, and it's about, what is it about? It's about living on Monday, Tuesday, etc. through Saturday, or is that to be interpreted
Friday.
more kind of allegorically or metaphorically? What is the book about?
Yeah, so the book is we actually started writing a few articles for the Diocesan magazine on how to like live liturgically or how to live your faith, in the home. And when we finished writing those, we're like, yes, let's put this in an ebook. Like we did something. Like we got these articles we can put in an ebook too. And
once again, not trying to do anything crazy.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
You're just gonna hey, let's put them together. We can put them into one PDF. I know how to copy and paste.
Yeah.
It's no problem. We'll put it on the internet.
Right.
PDF merge to my rescue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, easy.
And so we were mentioning that on our show, and one of the guys from Ascension heard it and said like, "Hey, let's make it a book." We thought this is awesome. We already have the content. All we got to do is just send it to them, and then they can make it all pretty.
We can pretend like we're published authors.
Right.
No one will know the difference.
Right. We realized very quickly though that that's not how books are, published, and so we had to scrap several chapters and rewrite and edit and all that kind of fun stuff. So this is
We did have to do a little bit of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is about a year and a half project or so. So that's kind of where how it started.
So the book is about Jesus, as all
Yes.
good books are. And so we just wanted to make a book. I was kind of thinking about writing these articles and the book for myself. I don't know, 8 years ago, when I'm just getting married, starting a family. How do we
build the domestic church?
What are the things that I have learned over these last 8 years that I have realized, these are very helpful in the rearing of my children, in the loving of my wife, in the practice of my faith at home, right? Because you can't be Catholic just one day out of the week unless you want to be lukewarm. It's advised strongly against by a number of good references and sources,
biblically speaking.
Yeah. So we don't want to do that. Let's go all out. I mean, if you want to be lukewarm, just at least admit it. Because there are people out there who they want to be lukewarm, and if that's you, hey, just be honest about it. Okay, don't pretend like you want to be holy or you want to achieve virtue or anything worth living for in your life. Okay, because you won't. And if that's where you're at, let's just start with the honesty about it all. But that's not what we want for ourselves. That's not what we want for our listeners. And so we wrote this book that we think will be helpful for people in living their life in a holy way beyond Sunday.
Yeah, I like the lukewarm, honesty. Dominicans are always big on virtus. Veritas. Virtus too. And honestly saying that you're lukewarm, just admitting to being that, actually, I don't really have high aspirations. I just want to be ordinary or something. I think that is the first stage of wisdom, is realizing that's what you want, and then asking yourself whether you ought to want that sort of thing.
Right.
And then being presented with examples of holiness that might appear just a little more tepid, I guess, or something. You're just kind of heating up slowly, such that you can want that too. So I like that. But I want to mention or ask you about the second thing, is that there are actually 4 authors of this book, if people notice. And I'm wondering, was this a forced arrangement, kind of a forced book authorship marriage, or was there free will involved here? Or how did the thought process go behind, hey, we're going to put our wives' names on here too? Or the wives were like, actually, we wrote the whole thing and we added the stuff. So this is a team effort. There are 8 hands to this. It seems like.
Yes. You know what? It really was a team effort. And the way that we split it up, because once again, this started as we're writing these articles for just the local diocesan magazine. So we kind of, in the beginning, we knew, all right, this is going to be a project on the domestic church. Where should we start? So we started, just kind of broad and got more specific, broad to specific as things went on. So we started off talking about the relationship, marriage, because that's the beginning of a domestic church. And so my wife and I wrote the chapter on marriage, and then we talked about motherhood. The ladies got together and they wrote the chapter on motherhood. Adam and I wrote the one on fatherhood. And so we divided it up like that as it went along. And that was for practical reasons as well, that it just made it easier to actually do the writing.
Mhm.
But it also helped get different perspectives, which I think really come through as you read the book. Which are very helpful. There were some challenges in having 4 authors, especially when it come to editing. You're sitting here reading something, and it's like, I know I didn't write this paragraph, and I honestly don't even know which of the other 3 people did. And I wonder if I can change it. Like, are we still going to be friends if I change this analogy, that they have in this book? So, yes, there were 4 authors. I was very, very, we were very blessed that our wives were willing to participate, because they're also very, very busy, running
The household.
busy households. But I was very glad to have their input, just for the end result of the book.
Okay, so on the Catholic Man Show, you talk often about virtue. It's kind of like one of your jams, as it were.
Yes.
And as you just described the process of editing, I have come to realize that editing is a concentrated or kind of focused experience of virtue. All right, so you want to live well with other people. You want to encourage them to live well with the Lord and with you. And it's not typically enough, or maybe it's too much, just to tell them what you think about the situation. Because, for instance, you read a sentence and your first thought is not how I'd have done it. Okay. And that's not necessarily because there are, typos or grammatical errors or whatever it is, but just, like it kind of rings different in your ear. And so you're thinking to yourself, how do I make this better? But maybe there's just a little bit of, how do I make this sound more like me? So as you're taking on a project, there are 4 of you. Some of you are married to each other. Some of you work with each other. And then some of the arrangements, that is not the case. So you're kind of navigating a bunch of different relationships, and you're trying to love people while produce a good product. Any lessons learned, or like things from the experience that you especially appreciated?
Yeah, for me, it was like that I give really terrible analogies, and I should just like come to the realization I give terrible analogies. And so part of living the virtuous life is, like we said, recognizing your weaknesses, recognizing where
I don't
you
think
are.
that's true. Now, I actually can think of some analogies that you've given that were hilariously
Bad.
funny. Yeah, it's like, I'm not sure why
You thought that was a good idea.
Like, you went to candy again.
Yeah, I give a lot of candy
for this
analogies.
analogy.
I do.
You're not even a big candy person.
I know.
Right? You think if anyone, I'd be giving the candy analogies.
I know.
But for the most part, I think you give great analogies. You just have some that have really
fallen flat.
that really stand out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so I think also it's just a matter of remembering what the end product is supposed to be, right? The end product is supposed to be a combination of different voices and different perspectives, and to remember that it's not a David Niles book, it's not an Adam Minahan book, but it's all 4 of us together. And I think that's what is the unique part about the book, is that it does provide those different aspects. So keeping the end in mind is always important.
Now, the dangerous part, of course, is that Adam used his thing was whether I could still be friends if I cut analogies. And then you said, I do bad analogies. But then, unfortunately, Adam said, no, I think you do great analogies, which means we're down to 50-50 about who actually makes poor analogies. And unfortunately, they're both your wives. So as long as they don't watch this episode, you guys might be able to sleep, not on the couch at some point. In any case, let's talk about...
we will not tell them that we were on the show today.
Yeah, we're not going to let them know.
That's probably... And no one's going to know. There's
Just
no
in
way
case.
of knowing. It's secret. Right. Don't tell anyone if you're watching this show. So
would you disguise our voice?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's,
and hide our identities? I know that kind of like ruins the point of having the authors on a book, but...
So,
anyway, keep going. Sorry.
What I want to ask about is people might, when you give the spiel, of course, the book, living more than Sunday, and people think, oh, these guys are going to be crazy. These guys are Catholic crazy guys. I mean, they're probably, have their own holy hours for 5 hours a day, and they only speak Latin at the house with the kids, this kind of stuff. So maybe just I don't know. Maybe that is how you guys live. But dispel some myths about. Can you live past Sunday and be an ordinary guy? You know.
Yeah. So first of all, I do embrace the crazy title. I do think that I'm ordinary, but I'm willing to change. I'm willing to not be ordinary if that's what it comes down to. I would love to be only speaking Latin at home with my kids. That would be awesome. Unfortunately, I don't speak Latin, and we do homeschool. We're gonna start teaching them Latin, and it's gonna be one of those things that I fear that someday they're gonna be able to speak Latin to each other, and I won't know it. And so they're gonna be like It's like, hey, what are you guys saying? You talking about me?
Yeah. Diabolos. I know what that means.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's that fighting chicken. I heard about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I'm going to say yes and no to your question.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I wanted
Because
you to do. Catholics
ye-
are both and people, so I want to hear how you're
Correct.
normal and how you're extraordinary, and what that means for being Catholics.
Okay, so we're made to serve God. Okay, so that's what we're made for. And so doing the thing that we're supposed to do, that is what should be normal. And so being an on-fire Catholic, being a saint, that is actually normal. Now, we have lost the true sense of normality, right? Like Christopher West uses this analogy, and who knows if maybe it's a bad analogy, but like imagine that we're all cars and we're driving around, but there's no air in our tires. Okay. And everybody's tires are just empty. And so we've forgotten that, you're supposed to have air. There's supposed to be air in these tires. And so, like by living the holy life, all of a sudden you can drive better. So I think it's not normal to be holy only when you look at what is what's the average person doing in their life. And I'm not saying that I am holy. I'm striving very, very hard to be so, but praise God, one day I will attain a virtue. Right. Yes, I do want it. So yes and no. You can absolutely live your life on fire, and that is a normal thing to do, except that other people won't think that it is. And so you will encounter resistance if you give your life over to the Lord. He told us that, and so that shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah. And I think also just like, understanding that you can take the normal things throughout the day and baptize them, so to speak, and make them Catholic, right? And so, we're driving in a car on the way to practice or whatever, and we bypass a church. Well, what do? You make the sign of the cross, right? In reverence to the Eucharist in the church. Or a ambulance drives by. What do? We stop and we make the sign of the cross. We pray a Hail Mary for that person that the ambulance is going to pick up. You can sanctify your day, and make it holy, and just be regular guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that we kind of talked about this recently, that whenever you have order in something, I think all things are Catholic if they are ordered. Okay. So for example, watching NFL football. Okay. That can be a very Catholic thing to do if you're doing it in an ordered way. Okay. Where this is a time, you're not letting football interfere with family life. You're not letting it interfere with things that are more important, right? You're doing it in a temperate and ordered way. And so as such, it becomes this great form of leisure, and leisure is Catholic. And so all things are Catholic if they have order. And so that's a lot of what we talk about in the book is about order and how to order the domestic church, the relationships that exist and those kinds of things.
I'm going to follow on just quickly for a second with an analogy and ask your wives if you think it's a good one or not. But I like this ordering principle, and I do it from a candy aspect, from a cookie cutter.
Perfect.
In a sense, we have this idea that like when you bring order to something, you establish a form or a shape on it. So you're cutting different kinds of dough into the particular Catholic shape, you could say. And in some ways, as you guys say, so much of life is just open to being cut into this right thing. Now you might think, oh my gosh, that changes it fundamentally. But no one thinks, well, they oughtn't think that when you take a cookie cutter and you cut the dough, that you've changed the dough. You've given the dough shape. You've made the dough what it ought to be, as opposed to some unformed blob. And oftentimes, I think in our lives, we think they're already formed, and therefore the Catholic thing is going to change them. Whereas opposed to actually the majority of our life is unformed or formed by the wrong kind of cutters. We've got to like put it together again and recut it with the Catholic model. But don't confuse yourself if you think that you've actually got already pre-cut, ready to go. And probably a blob. Now there are some, of course, you can't take Jell-O and try to use a cookie cutter on it, that sort of thing. But I think there is this way of that our lives can be shaped, and it doesn't change. This is the extraordinary, ordinary part. It's extraordinary in the sense that it's reshaped, these little actions, but it's not changed. They're no longer like it's not like you wouldn't recognize this as a human life and a family life and a joyous life. In fact, it would be exactly what it was meant to do.
I can just tell you by the look in Adam's eyes that you blew his mind with that cookie cutter
Use
analogy.
that answer. You asked us the question. Just use, if you can in post, just use his answer for that. That would be great.
Yeah, so before we push record on this episode, we talked about how we were going to ask very specific, like personal historical questions about the book and its formulation, and that David and Adam were going to consider just appealing to Father Bonaventure as to what he thought about the matter.
Yes,
so we just did that, in effect. I too thought it was an excellent analogy.
The future foretold.
The only part of it that I didn't approve of was the fact that you failed to recognize the excellence of Jell-O jigglers, which have been cut
Yes,
with
I'm
cookie
so
cutters.
glad you said that. I was also like debating within myself, do I correct the good father on the Jell-O jiggler aspect of the analogy?
But I mean, like when the Jell-O, not in the sense of like after it's made, but I meant to say when it's in the water, that kind of watery stage where you add things to it. Like you're just kind of like cooking cutter into liquids. But I get
I think you could also
once it's Jell-O, then yes. Yeah.
You could argue
I
an
should have said
essential
I should have
difference
said a liquid substance.
between Jell-O and Jell-O jigglers because they were marketed as different products. Okay, so
Economics
Shape
does
matters.
determine the essence of things in our economy. Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like Reese's peanut butter cups are good, but Reese's.
I mean, I've got more questions,
like,
Father Gregory, but I think you've got questions.
I've got lots of questions, but right now I'm thinking about different Reese's products, and I have like basically the same ingredients, but in different proportions, and how that just changes everything. Like Reese's peanut butter eggs, for whatever reason, they're just a lot better than peanut butter cups, and I think it's because the chocolate layer is much thinner. But that's for another day. We'll explore that on our next Guestsplaining episode with
Idealism.
the host of the Catholic Man Show. So I have a follow-up question, and it concerns. Okay, so you do the Catholic Man Show. Your audience is principally men. And you're thinking about men in your kind of apostolic endeavors. In writing this book, as you address yourself to men, my suspicion is that a lot of men don't really think that they're good at doing those little things that you described. Because, and here I am, just gonna use some gender stereotypes. I think that women are typically more attentive to the heart. They're typically more engaged relationally, and they're better at kind of noting or taking advantage of those like little opportunities. Whereas I think that men are less so. To use the stereotype. And I think that like if you were asked a man, like, do you have any hobbies? He'd be like, I don't know if I have any hobbies. I like watch football sometimes, and I drink beer. I also smoke cigars. I read books. Whereas like if you ask some women, they're like, yes, I am taking a calligraphy class, and I learned yachting recently. And also there's this thing that it's just like, holy smokes. Okay, so for the male listener who's thinking about sanctifying the work week, sanctifying the domestic church, and being, like present to his children in fun and engaging ways, a word of encouragement. Do you have to be creative? What are the ways in which you go about being on the lookout for these types of things?
yeah, no, you don't have to be creative. I think you take as your model as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Okay, so that's the number one. You need to, as the man, as the head of the household, you need to make sure, that we're talking about basic minimums here, that you have a house that is Catholic. Okay, that means you observe all of the things required of you by the church. You attend Sunday Mass and all holy days. You have a culture of sacraments. Okay, so you're bringing your family to confession on a regular basis. That you have a life of prayer within the home. I think that really the most important thing for a man is to make sure that he has himself a good prayer life. If you, as the head and the father of the home, do not have a prayer life, then you should not expect your children to ever have a prayer life. And you shouldn't expect to be able to have any good, like spiritual insight into the needs of your own household. Because if you're not cultivating your own relationship with Christ, then I don't know why anyone else in your house would, because the studies have all shown that your children especially are going to take their religious sentiments from your own religious practices. Okay, so if they know and see that prayer is important to you as a dad, then they will also imbibe this idea that prayer is important and it's something that should be done. And so they will also take on that same idea. And so that's, I think, the most important thing. That what is your prayer life? Do you have a prayer life, or do you just kind of pray when it, like, oh, when I think about it, I pray, so it's basically like when you're sick or when you're having a hard time, is that when you pray? Because it's good to pray then. Those are good times to pray, but that's not a prayer life. So you need daily, this is when I pray. This is, maybe even how long I pray for. Those are the kinds of basic things that you need to establish. And then you can help pass those same principles on to your kids. If you want to add anything to that, Adam.
Well, I just think you don't have to be, like you said, you don't have to be creative, right? The beauty and the wisdom of Mother Church, she's given us prayers, right? So we don't have to come up with our own prayers, even if we don't know how to. The church in her wisdom has given us the liturgy, the hours that we can pray. And we also encourage a lot on our show is that as men, if you do not have a weekly holy hour of adoration, you need to. You need to take your prayer life seriously and say, like, I need to have an hour where I can be one-on-one with Jesus. And like when you walk in there, know that like you don't have to necessarily do anything, just waste time with our Lord. Just be with him and know that for like 2,000 years, he's been waiting there for you, for that moment to be with you and to waste time with you.
Yeah, really, I want to echo that having a weekly adoration hour, I think, is so important. If there are very few people who truly do not have the ability to work in throughout the week an hour of adoration. Okay, because if you're in a city of medium size or greater, there's almost assuredly a perpetual adoration chapel somewhere. Maybe a couple of them. Okay, so that means all the time you can sign up for any hour that you want, whether it's in the morning or in the evening or whatever works for your schedule. So I find it very hard to buy into that, oh, you don't have time for an adoration hour. And if you're not willing to go to an hour a week of adoration, I think that unless, of course, your spiritual director has told you otherwise, I think you really need to you need to ask yourself whether you're serious about growing in holiness or not.
Well, I think that's you guys, that expression, wasting time with Jesus, or wasting time on Jesus. I mean, this is what act of love. Love is this ecstatic kind of exuberant waste in a way, right? There's nothing particularly efficient about lovers. There's nothing particularly calculated about lovers in a way. There's this, mathematicians maybe, but there's always an exception to sort of rule. But in general, loving has this, that's why it's like, it's weird and uncomfortable and kind of embarrassing, and no one likes when you're watching lovers or what have you. It just, they don't make sense to each other. They have their own their own kind of logic to it. And a lot of it's just wasting time. You waste time with family. Anyone who has a family knows this sort of thing. If you try to figure out exactly counting, okay, we're going to do this for this, you want to have organization, but a lot of your time is just wasted time. And what you're doing is you're taking valuable time, your time, and you're saying, I'm going to give this to you, and I don't care what you do with it, because you are important. And I think it's so valuable in our relationship with Christ to not get something done, but as you say, to just give him time so that he could do something. You don't have to, in adoration, go and do something. You just have to go there and be with him and let him do something. And that, who knows what will come from that. But I love the wasting time business. I just want to ask a question on being Catholic men, because in some ways we've got a low bar, because most people assume that religion, I think this is changing a little bit since people think that religion isn't for anyone today, but generally for women, this is like a thing that women do, and men get dragged there or something. so in some ways, if you're just a Catholic guy and you just show up to church and like face the right way in the mass, people are like, what a devout man. Whereas the woman has to, really be attentive to stuff. But the reason for that, of course, is that I think there's some rumor going around that being Catholic isn't manly. So I'm sure you guys, the Catholic Man Show, you've got this book about living beyond Sunday. Encouragement to Catholic guys or guys in general. Is there anything? What's manly about being a Catholic man, taking your faith seriously? You're not just becoming women, are you?
No, I mean the life of a Catholic man is arduous. It's difficult. It's a like glorious self martyrdom of self for the love of our Lord. And so, I mean, you guys don't live easy cupcake lives. Like, being a Dominican is arduous, right? You have to be studious. You have to be devout. You have to be disciplined. You have to, there's virtues that are required for your vocation, and similarly for Catholic men who are family men, right? You have to continually, every day, choose. You wake up to choose and love your wife. You have to wake up every day and choose to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, but is good for your family. And so it's not an easy life, but it's one very, very much worth pursuing, because it gives you a joy and a happiness that can only be filled whenever you do sacrifice yourself for others.
Yes, I would like to respond to this question in two ways.
I answer that.
Firstly, similar to what Adam was saying, that yes, the religious life or the moral life or the spiritual life is going to constantly call you to do things that you don't want to do, that you will have to have self-mastery. Self-mastery is the worst, okay? There's nothing worse than that. I say that in like an experiential way. There's nothing greater. I mean, that's like the greatest. All virtue essentially comes down to self-mastery. And so, yes, there will be times where you're called to be temperate when you don't want to be. In fact, if you want to talk about an easy life, don't be religious, and you can basically do whatever you want all the time, and there's no problem with any of it, right? I mean, like, so there's nothing. Right? Yeah, exactly. If you want to talk about effeminacy, okay, well, the secular life is. That's the life for you. If you aspire to be effeminate, then go and you just, do your own thing and just believe all the things that the culture is going to tell you.
All the isms.
Right? Okay, so that's the first thing, is that obviously, if you know anybody who's practiced religion, they will tell you, no, it's difficult and it takes arduous virtue. The second way I will respond to this is that justice is clearly a masculine virtue. Religion is a sub-virtue of justice, and therefore is a masculine virtue.
Oh, syllogism. Boom. Nice work.
It's awesome.
Thank you.
QED, as they say in the business,
good.
but St. Thomas didn't say that. And insofar as you were composing for yourself a little article of St. Thomas's, I will leave it unsaid. Hey, kudos for a variety of reasons. One, it's clear that you guys have a good vibe. The Catholic Man Show has formed you into a dynamic duo. I forgot how very delightful are the David Niles straight man sledgehammers. It's like, you know what? You're lying to yourself. It's like, let's go. Meanwhile, Adam, over the course of the last 6 years, has learned not to feel uncomfortable while David lowers the boom. He's like,
isn't that true?
I'm with him. I am with him. I am more and more with him with each
facts.
passing year.
If you want to send me into a rage, just say, like, give me the brute fact, like, arguments against the 5 ways. Like, maybe it's just a brute fact that things did come to existence. It's like, maybe it's a brute fact that I'm about to assault you.
I love it. You bring like a kind of, you bring like a kind of retired Baltimore City police officer feel to the show, which is awesome.
The first, maybe, possibly.
Hey, what are you doing over there? Yeah.
No, but sincerely, honestly, thanks so much for joining us. I read your book. I enjoyed your book. And yeah, I was very delighted just to have the opportunity to read through it closely and to draw from it little nuggets, little insights, because I think sometimes, like regardless of kind of where you find yourself in your spiritual life, it's good to have a fresh perspective, and a fresh perspective which is Eucharistic, that's ecclesial, and that's so fired with love of our Lord Jesus. So thanks for writing it. For those who are looking to purchase the book, where should they turn?
They can go to ascensionpress.com. And thank you so much for writing a blurb for the book. We really appreciate your endorsement. Thank you.
My joy. All right.
You're
So
welcome.
please do check out the Catholic Man Show and other good works of the St. Michael's radio station based out of Omaha, Nebraska, which has become, excuse me, I just said Omaha, Nebraska. What I meant to say was Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's embarrassing, which is a hub of Catholic life and Catholic masculinity, because isn't like the Catholic gentleman, isn't Sam Guzman just like right around the corner from
Yeah.
Yeah. A mile away.
He's in our
Incredible.
weekly Friday breakfast group.
Yeah.
It's incredible. All right, so
Yeah,
come to
we're coming.
Tulsa, join for the weekly Friday breakfast group, and be sure to pick up a copy
You're
of
welcome.
Living
You're
Beyond
welcome
Sunday.
to come.
All right, turning to you, the listener. Thanks as always for listening. I'm turning things into not things. Thanks as always for listening to Godsplaining. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Like the episode, subscribe on YouTube or on your podcast app, and leave a 5-star review in the goodness of your heart. If you'd like to donate to the podcast through Patreon, please follow the link in the description or in the show notes. And there you will also find links to shop merchandise. And come a couple months from now, you'll also find links for upcoming Godsplaining events. So we've got them queued up for summer and early fall, and we'll have those details to you shortly. So know of our prayers for you. Please pray for us, and we'll look forward to chatting with you next time on Godsplaining.